All advice given is for general information purposes. All legal cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Hey, good afternoon. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. And we're going to talk with David Goldman. David, how are you?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
Good. I've got you live here on the air up here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I know you practice, out of Florida?
Yes.
And your organization, however, and I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about that, is helping people all around the country with these gun trust issues.
Correct. We created the concept of a gun trust about a little over 5 years ago and have around 200 lawyers around the country that help individuals and their families with the preparation of these.
The reason I wanted to bring you on is I have noticed in the last several years that I've gotten increasingly more and more questions about gun trusts, and a lot of people are focused, of course, at least around here, on the concept of getting a gun trust so that they can legally own, as they would say it, legally own a a fully automatic or a silenced weapon for target shooting and other purposes. But as I've researched it and looked at particularly your material, you see the gun trust as a much broader vehicle than that.
Correct. When we originally created the trust, that was the primary function, was to be able to purchase and manage the use of those firearms. The Title II firearms, which you've been referring to, are a little more restricted than regular firearms, and they generally require special permission from the sheriff. But as times change, quite often we've found that the local sheriffs are unwilling to allow anyone to purchase these, even police officers. And the trust has a lot of other benefits in that it allows multiple individuals to have access to the firearms. So, your spouse can use them or friends can use them, things like that. While if you buy them as an individual, you're the only one that's allowed to have access to it. And if your spouse knows the combination of the gun safe, or you leave one in the back of your car and they take it to the grocery store, it can actually result in some criminal penalties for both of you.
So basically the concept of the trust is to broaden the ownership, because I assume that the people who are authorized by the trust to use the weapon are somebody who can lawfully possess it?
Correct. Much in the same way as if a company owned an item, that you could allow people within the company to use it. The trust doesn't have any yearly fees associated with it, so over the long term it ends up being a much more cost-effective and a better tool to use, because it manages the firearms in the case of incapacity or death also. Go ahead.
Yeah, and these trusts that you're talking about, are they an irrevocable trust or a revocable trust?
Most of them are revocable. We have a new trust. Well, I say new; it's about a year old. That is based on an irrevocable trust, and the benefit there is it creates a multi-generational ownership without having to pay the $200 per unit transfer fee at each generation. Plus, it provides asset protection for the owners of the firearms, as well as the future beneficiaries from their creditors. What we found, though, is over time is that many of the same issues in distributing firearms to children or to adult children, right, or beneficiaries exist for regular firearms as well as for these more restricted ones. For example, you don't know where your beneficiary is going to live when you pass away. You don't know if they're going to be legally eligible to receive these items. And probably most importantly, you don't know if they're going to be mature and responsible enough that you'd want to put a firearm in their hands, regardless of whether they have their own or not. And so the trust allows for, or the gun trust allows for, this type of decision-making to take place during incapacity and end of life, where traditional estate planning kind of ignores all the common sense rules that gun owners tend to follow in regards to giving and allowing other people to use firearms. Regular estate planning or lack of it, your states and testate laws will generally say, as long as the person's 18, which may not be legal, give the gun to the drug addict, or give the gun to the felon, or give the gun to someone who's in a horribly stressful situation in their life where you wouldn't want to actually do that. And there's not a choice to not do it.
Right, and that's where and of course I'm sitting back as the lawyer for the estate, and the administrator says to me, well, what do I need to do? I mean, it says here I've got to give the guns to the 3 boys, and, 2 of them are nuts. What do I do? And you say, well, I mean, I guess you propose a distribution that doesn't give it to them, and then they're going to object because they really are entitled to them. And then the judge is going to have to sort it out, and he's got no great mechanism for that either, except to hold a hearing at great expense to the estate.
Yeah, historically, this has never been a problem in the past because there were no real restrictions on who could own or purchase firearms really until the 60s with the civil rights movements. And many people don't realize that the gun legislation came out of an attempt to keep guns out of the hands of minorities. And that's kind of the stem of the modern gun legislation in the U.S. If you think back to the Black Panthers in the 60s, and then it just kind of spread throughout the United States. And so wherever you see gun registration and restrictions, it's really racially based. And at least originally.
And I agree. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the Black Panthers were one of the first pro-gun organizations. In terms of battling with the government over gun ownership. We have actually up here, we're not a registration state here in Pennsylvania, but our state police have started keeping a record of every transfer and purchase. And our Supreme Court said, well, it's not a registry, it's just a record. So therefore, and because you're not if you move into the state with a gun, you don't have to register it. And if you get it, say, through an inheritance or buy it at a yard sale or certain other things that we can do here, particularly long arms, you don't have to tell anybody you have it. But we still have a de facto registry because anything you buy at the Cabela's or the Gander Mountain or any other major retailer or licensed firearms dealership, and any transfer of a handgun is going to end up on this de facto registry here.
And I believe you also have different rules in different cities. For example, like Philadelphia is a different class of a city and has different rules than other parts of
Correct. Philadelphia has slightly different because you can't effectively open carry there, as I understand it. But we also have a weird lack of rules when it comes to open carry. So theoretically here in Pennsylvania, I can strap my Glock on my hip as long as it's visible, and I need no permit and I need no permission. But I can't drive in my car with it because if it's loaded and in my car with me, then I do need the concealed carry permit, which is kind of an interesting quirk.
Each state has, interesting laws. I mean, some states don't have any more restrictions than the federal restrictions, but one of the problems is, we live in a very transient society, so where people live today is not necessarily where they'll live in the future, and more than likely their kids or beneficiaries will live in other states, and so it becomes more complex than just knowing the laws of your own state. You've got to really understand how the laws of the different states and the federal laws restrict those even further. Lately, we've seen, you've seen the rise in a number of states legalizing marijuana in one form or another, and that's, while it may be legal in those states, it's still a federal crime, and it's a prohibition to own firearms or have ammunition in your possession if you're a medical marijuana user or even considered a legal marijuana user under like Colorado's new laws. So there's a lot of things taking place that people just don't realize affect their rights to own firearms.
Very interesting. Oh, I've got to go to break here. When we come back from the break, I'm going to sort of maybe invite some callers here, which is 540-0580. If you want to call in and find out about how to get a gun trust, a little bit more about how this works. And then we'll talk, too, also about your program and how people can get involved in it, because I've been trying to tell people, you need to go with a law firm or an organization that's got some history with these, because I would imagine you're getting to the point now where you start to see some practical feedback. This is how we wrote it 5 years ago, and this is why we've tweaked it a little bit since, things like that. So that's what I want to talk to you after the break, okay?
Okay.
All right, hold on. 540-0580, back after the break. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. I've got David Goldman, the gun trust lawyer, on with me. And, David, I think we have a caller or two, so I'm going to throw him on with us. Andy.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. You have a question for David Goldman or myself?
Well, the gun trust thing, is there a website or anything? I just had gotten on right at the end of that where we can check that out.
We have two websites. The main one is guntrustlawyer.com.
Okay.
And that really has the general information on each of the states and resources to find out more information about the trusts. And then there's a relatively new website that's been set up, which is guntrust.com, where you can actually create one online that actually produces a gun trust.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just another quick question, I guess, for you, Carl, or possibly for both of you. When somebody, I'm a little older now, but when somebody has a son turning 12, is there laws or anything? You can still give your son or your grandson, I have one of those coming up, buy a firearm for them for hunting, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, ownership, here's a question. This is always, this doesn't matter about guns or anything. The things that you buy for your minor child really probably still belong to you, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Dave,
the other thing is that in federally and in every state there are restrictions on obviously supervision, and those vary depending on the activity and the age that they're in. But generally, they range about 18 for a rifle and 21 for a pistol before they can use them on their own. So, like the unfortunate incident that happened in Connecticut yesterday, it was a 20-year-old. He didn't buy those things, and there's probably some negligence issues of his mother not securing them and keeping them away from him. But obviously it's not really. It's wise to have a gun safe or to have places where you keep them that obviously children or other people are not going to have access to them.
Yeah, I got a gun safe with quite a few guns in. No one's getting to them but my wife or myself. Just one last question there, and I caught that at the very end when you said it. I recently had an older gentleman give me a 9mm handgun, and I've never been a handgun person other than black powder. I can carry that gun as long as it's not in my car. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and now, of course, if he gave it to you, I'm sure you guys did. Last week we talked about this a little bit, just that it's best to go to a federally licensed firearms dealer and do the transfer there, just so it's completely clean, although technically under Pennsylvania law you don't have to do it there. You still should have a bill of sale and all those good things.
Gotcha.
That said, yeah, you can open carry a handgun in Pennsylvania. Now, I have had people charged with disorderly conduct on the theory that they're creating a physically offensive condition, but every time that ever comes for a hearing, the police then dismiss the charge. But they use a disorderly conduct charge as a basis to remove you from the environment, along with your handgun.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That's all I have.
I think it's important to remember, just because you can do something doesn't mean it's wise to do it.
Exactly.
And,
I
a lot of times, exercising your rights may cause adverse repercussions on the rights that we do have.
Gotcha.
A good example of that is, in Arizona, schools that had polling were not considered schools, and as a result, you were allowed to open carry into a polling place, which happened to be a school. And there was a gentleman that exercised his right to do that, and of course he was arrested, and probably after thousands and thousands of dollars worth of expenses, he will be exonerated from it. But now everybody's looking at it saying, is this really a good idea that we let people do this? And so they may create more restrictive laws as a result of, some activities that people decide to engage in.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Hey, thank you.
540-0580. Bill, you're on the air with David Goldman, the Gun Trust lawyer, and Carl Rominger. Bill, are you there?
Bill.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. What I'm interested in is what is a preferable instrument, a will or a revocable or irrevocable trust for me?
Well, let's just start. We're talking about gun trust right now, but your question's actually a good one as well, which is a will or a trust. In Pennsylvania, an irrevocable trust is going to remove things from your estate, and they're going to flow through the trust absolutely. A revocable trust is still going to be subject to estate tax and potentially still move through the probate process very similarly. So here in Pennsylvania, we don't see huge advantages to revocable trusts for state planning purposes. But that said, it doesn't mean that it can't be beneficial. So what you need to really do is sit down with a lawyer and do an estate plan that's going to depend on a lot of things: your income, your marital status, properties owned, types of properties owned, children, strategies, goals. So there's no right answer for any one person.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Carl.
So the right answer is go sit down with a guy like me or a gal who does this kind of work and have them go over your individual situation.
Would a will be sufficient?
Well, Will's gonna do most of the things you're going to want to do. The difference is just doing a will. Now here's the question. If you have a family farm, let's say, you might want to consider some more advanced estate planning to avoid tax. We don't know what the federal taxation is going to look like next year either.
Right.
All right?
Yes, sir.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Hey, thank you much, Carl.
540-0580. We're on with David Goldman, the Gun Trust lawyer. Yuri, you have a question.
Did you say Yuri?
Yeah.
Hi. I have a question for you. This is a little off subject. Probably end of next year, I'm going out to Nevada to Front Sight to do some pistol training, and they recommend bringing a backup pistol. My stepson has one. It's registered in his name. It's the same thing that I carry. What's the legality of him giving me permission to take that as a backup for training?
Well, I can tell you in Pennsylvania what the legality is, but I don't know about Nevada law.
Okay.
And David, this might be an interesting segue. Like, how could a trust help in a situation like this?
Well, Nevada's got kind of an interesting thing. As long as you're keeping it in the trunk of your car and in a case with it not loaded, you're able to transport it. But to conceal carry in Nevada, you actually need what's called a blue card there, which is and they'll list it by caliber. So if you've gone through training and are permitted to carry, you might have one that shows 9mm and 40 and 45 and all the different calibers that you're permitted to carry. But there's really not any restriction as far as taking it to Nevada. Because all the guns that are legal in Pennsylvania are also legal there, so you need to make sure that they're legal there. If you do have a concealed weapons permit, there are some websites like concealedcarry.org where you can check. You type in which state you're a resident of, which permits you have, and it'll show you a map of what states it's valid in, which is kind of a neat resource.
I was just wondering about I'm taking it to the training center and then doing the training and flying home with it. I'm not going to be carrying while I'm there. So I didn't know, since it was registered under his name, whether if anybody questioned, if there would be some kind of ramification.
Remember, no guns in Pennsylvania are registered.
Okay.
So we're not a registration state. So there's really, theoretically, anybody can have anybody else's handgun.
Oh, okay.
The question is whether or not you can lawfully possess it or not. Right. And, of course, if I'm going to loan somebody a handgun, I sort of have to be aware of whether they can lawfully possess it, because once I have any knowledge they can't, then I can be in trouble for just handing it to you.
Sure. Okay. Well, then I'll check on those laws and see how that pans out.
All right, Yuri, thanks.
Thank you very much.
David, people who want to find out a little bit more about your organization and how to get a hold of you, what do they need to do?
They can go to the guntrustlawyer.com website, and on the right-hand side of the page, there's a Contact Us form, and they can request a little information. There's a couple of check boxes there. They can tell us a little bit about themselves and what it is they're interested in, or they can just review the website. And there's a lot, there's 5 years worth of articles that I've written on there. So
I see that, and it's very in depth, and I highly recommend it. I've learned a lot there myself. So. And I like the fact that you have kind of given yourself some education in so many different states, which is an issue that comes up because, probably as a lawyer, you've run into this over the years. People want to know what the law is, and then you say, well, hold your horses, the law where?
Yeah, and we're not really we're only allowed to give advice and legal advice in the states where we're licensed, but we do have attorneys in all these other states that have run across many of these issues, and they, as we run across them, as you were mentioning before, we continue to enhance the trust so it deals with real life issues that come up. So the trust that we have today is vastly different than the trust from 2006, 2007. And it just continues to get better, and there's different options. And
we've heard some stories, since you're even here on the air, of various firearm shops that basically are handing out a trust. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to want to talk to you about the dangers of just getting a piece of paper from somebody somewhere and filling it out. 540-0580 is the talk line number. Jim, you're on with David Goldman, the gun trust lawyer.
Hi. It's a little bit off subject. I'm calling about inheriting a firearm, specifically a pistol, and wondering what the legal ramifications or requirements are on something like that from a family member.
In Pennsylvania, you may, from father to son, grandparent to child, brother to sister, husband to wife, inherit a firearm with no requirement whatsoever except to take possession of it. Now, if you're not lawfully able to take possession of it, then it's going to be a crime for you to do so.
Okay, and part two, if I were to have a carry permit, would I be able to carry said firearm to another state by vehicle, say a state that has
reciprocity?
There you go. But I would have to transit a state perhaps it did not. What would be involved in that situation?
Well, we see that a lot of times with people driving through New York, let's say.
Right.
New York has very strict firearms laws, and generally advise people not to take firearms with them through the state, but possibly ship them. It doesn't mean that you can't. It's legal to do so as long as you're driving straight through and you're not taking too big of a detour. So if you get off the highway to get gas, or you're sleeping or something like that. But if you were to go to the mall or go shopping or go to some sort of a theater or something, something other than directly traveling through the state, then it becomes problematic. The New York police, tend to be a little aggressive, and many people have found themselves spending the night in jail for something that's perfectly legal to be doing. But and that's kind of why New York is kind of an exception. The gun may be legal where you're at in Connecticut or Rhode Island or wherever you're going to, but there may be some problems along the way. So technically, you don't have to detour around that state. The one exception I might give to people is if they're going through New York.
Okay, well that helps a lot. New York wasn't on the agenda, fortunately.
All right, I got to go to break, guys. When we come back, David Goldman and I are going to talk about gun trust, and we're going to talk a little bit about why you might not want to just fill out the form your local gun shop has. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. I've got David M. Goldman, the gun trust lawyer here. David, I made reference before the break to this idea. We have people reporting that they can go to their local gun shop and they're handed a form called a gun trust. Fill it out, sign it, and voila, you have a trust. Is that a good idea?
Well, generally they're not receiving a gun trust. Generally they're receiving a traditional revocable trust.
Okay.
And the biggest problem with those is, besides that they may not be set up properly and may not be valid, and they may be illegally in possession of the items as a result, is that they generally instruct people to break the law. And so, you kind of get back to what a trust is. And a trust is a set of rules that you create to manage assets during your life, incapacity, and upon your death. And the rules that are appropriate for bank accounts and other types of financial assets directly contradict the federal and state laws when it comes to the ownership, transfer, possession, and use of firearms. And so generally they're not a good idea to do. A lot of gun stores are using just straight, Intuit's Quicken software, Quickens
Right.
Intuit's software, Willmaker or Trustmaker to create a trust. If you do create a valid trust, it will work to be able to purchase the items. We're not saying that it doesn't create a valid trust. It's just the rules in the trust that are generally what your family and friends follow when something happens to you, allow inappropriate people to come into access and instruct them to do things that are illegal. And as a result of that, it could be quite dangerous and create a lot of liability. The penalties in dealing with the NFA firearms, silencers, short-barrel rifles, short-barrel shotguns, AOWs, and the machine guns, generally it's a $250,000 penalty, up to 10 years in jail, and confiscation of the firearms and the loss of the vessel in which the firearms are located, which could be your car, your home, or a boat, or wherever they happen to come across them. So it's not something to play around with and take risks.
The other thought, and one of my friends, Mark Virginis, who's a financial planner, comes on the show quite a bit, just posted on Facebook saying that the other advantage here might be when you have hard-to-value firearms in a trust, getting them outside of the estate might be a good idea as well for purposes.
Correct. Our irrevocable trust, which is a higher-end trust generally designed for somebody with $20,000 or more in firearms, is kind of neat because it's got a lot of advantages over the regular trust, and some of them apply to some people and others don't. But generally what they are is it can take them outside of your countable assets for Medicaid planning. So as people get older, they're at a real risk of losing their guns if they ever need nursing home coverage or an organ transplant or some sort of government benefits there. Mm-hmm. So the guns essentially don't become yours, and after 5 years, then they can't take them away. Or force you to liquidate them to be able to qualify for these benefits. Number two is the asset protection of the items. So if you're in a car accident or a lawsuit or professional negligence or something that creates liability, those assets aren't available to future creditors. Obviously, if you have an existing mortgage and you default on it at the time when you create the trust, they would be able to go after those assets under the fraudulent transfer rules. And then there's probably the most compelling reason at this point, and especially with listening to President Obama's words and trying to comfort the country yesterday, is that we're expecting future gun legislation, whether it be in the form of laws in the United States or the UN gun treaty. And once you put these guns in an irrevocable trust, they're no longer yours anymore. So all the laws historically have prohibited future transfers, but never taken away the guns that we already possessed. So with an irrevocable trust, depending on, I'm not sure, what's the rule against perpetuities in Pennsylvania?
I think we still have rules against perpetuities, but then somebody recently told me that it's been eviscerated to the point where you can probably get around it.
Okay, so even if not, once the trust is formed, you can elect the rules of another state. So you can essentially pick a state where there is no rule against perpetuities, so you can keep the guns forever in the trust, and then the kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and beyond just become authorized users of them. There's no transfer taxes.
I just looked here. We did abolish it basically in '06 it was abolished.
Okay. So you could essentially create an irrevocable trust that lasts forever in Pennsylvania, and then you don't have to worry about future legislation once the guns are in the trust. The risk that a lot of people take is they say, well, they may think about that later, and once the law is in place, then it's a transfer to put it into your trust. So you've actually got to get the guns into the trust before these future unknown laws become implemented, and then you'd have the protections there. Even states like Washington, or no, it's not a state, but Washington D.C. when they banned handguns back in the 70s, it was if you already had a handgun, you could keep it. You just couldn't buy new ones.
Yeah, it's the old that's quite often the political purpose is how to keep the people who already have the haves from getting too upset. So you say, okay, you can have what you have. Or I think even in France, didn't they let anybody who had a gun from the resistance keep a gun even after they enacted their gun legislation post-war?
Europe has become increasingly more restrictive on firearms, and a lot of the gun owners in the United States look to Europe as to what might happen in the United States, and that's why they're very reluctant to create, a de facto registration of their firearms, which is another reason why a gun trust is better than a traditional trust, in that as you're purchasing these items, you're only reporting to ATF what they're entitled to know about anyway. But if you put other firearms in our trust, you're not creating a de facto registration with the ATF, where if you use a Quicken trust that has a Schedule A on it, you list all your guns.
Right.
The first time you go buy a silencer, all of a sudden ATF knows everything about everything you own.
And they just remade Red Dawn, which is coming out. But if you remember the old Red Dawn movie, what's the first thing? They go to the local gun store and pull all the sales receipts to say, okay, now go out and find these guys and get their guns.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. So we got another question here for you. John, you're on the air.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. One was about transporting. You were talking about don't go through New York. What happens if you're flying and your plane touches down in a place that doesn't like guns, and you check this as checked baggage in your luggage, and legally, and they said, oh, there's a gun on board, seize the guy, and take him off the plane. And the other question is about insurance within the trust. Where does the insurance reside? Because these guns are going to be fairly expensive. You have more than one gun. You could have quite a large asset value.
Right. So insurance is an issue that comes up a lot, and the way that you deal with that is the way that you deal with any type of asset in a trust, is that you have to have your trust name as an additional insured on the insurance policy. So if a trust owns a vehicle, you'd have to name the trust as an additional insured. And most companies don't rate you as a commercial policy rates when you do that, but you need to be careful of that because there are some that will try to. But the bigger ones, State Farm and Nationwide and USAA and Geico and those, they're all familiar with doing that on a regular basis, especially with vehicles and homes and other assets. As far as traveling, you have to have at the airport, you have to have them inspect and have an approved carry-on device to put the firearm in. The one issue that really becomes risky is, what happens if you're just touching down in New York and you're flying on to someplace else, or someplace like New York where the items may not be legal, and your plane is canceled, and you have to go pick up your luggage. The problem comes in is you can probably pick it up, but when you come back to the airport to check it again, you're asking to get into a lot of trouble. So if you can stay within in a hotel inside the airport, sometimes depending on the laws of the state, that's satisfactory. But if you're being put up or staying in a hotel or a residence outside of the airport, that becomes problematic. And at that point, I'm not really sure what you would do, but you'd have to check with somebody in that state to find out what the proper way of dealing with it, whether you have to ship the items back through a gun dealer back to wherever you're going to or something else like that. But I think you'd run a real risk bringing it back to the airport and checking it in.
Well, yeah, like for instance, certain types of guns are not legal at all in New Jersey. So if your plane made an unscheduled landing, would they seize the gun?
Well, John, I think I got to go to break. So let David think about that for a minute, and we'll talk in a minute. All right?
Yeah.
All right. See you in a minute. 540-0580. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here. I got David M. Goldman of the Gun Trust Lawyer, or The Gun Trust Lawyer. Go to guntrustlawyer.com, which I put up on Facebook. David, I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to burn through a couple callers here because I think we got some guys here. Doug, you want to talk about gun trust and stamps? Doug? You're on the air, Doug.
Yeah, okay. All right. Didn't hear my name. I was told, or I believe I read, that if you're going to get a suppressor or a full auto gun, something like that, you want to have it entered into a trust, that it actually has to be stamped with the name of the trust. Is that right? Is that something that's optional?
No, that's you only have to engrave the name of the trust if you're actually building it. So if you were going to make your own suppressor, then you would have to engrave it. But otherwise, it's already engraved with the manufacturer's make, model, and serial number on the device.
So getting it into the trust is not, it's nothing more than just doing the paperwork, that kind of thing. There's no gunsmith involved with that.
Correct.
Once you own something. Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks a lot.
And now, David, we've got Rob. Rob, what's your question for David Goldman?
Yes, I have three. I have two suppressors and an SBR right now, all stamped under my person. If I would go to a trust, do I have to pay the $200 tax on each of those items again?
Yes. You shouldn't have to, but nobody has challenged that with the ATF yet, and because it's only $200. If it was $10,000, people would challenge it, but it would cost more in legal fees to challenge it than to just pay it. So at this point in time, you're having to.
So we need to find a gun collector who has, like 1,000 items that he wants to transfer into a trust, right?
Or get a whole group of people together to jointly fund a
class
challenge.
Yeah, which of course, there's famous stories. Once the lawyer starts taking money from the group dissolves as soon as the money's necessary. All right, David, first of all, people want to read more about you, go to theguntrustlawyer.com. You practice out of Florida, and are you licensed in other states as well?
I am not, but again, we have relations with lawyers in about 43 states, including Pennsylvania, and we're happy to work with their own lawyer if they, as long as they're willing to do so.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to recommend that our listeners who've listened today go to theguntrustlawyer.com, learn more about what you do. I think you saw we had a pretty good flow of callers, and we get regular questions on gun issues, and this gun trust has come up again and again. And so if I could summarize it, what people should take out of this is a way to both own weapons that you might not otherwise be able to own because your local sheriff doesn't have to stamp off on you owning it. But it's also a estate planning tool that can be used to take something that's very important to a lot of families, which is the family guns, and allow for them to be passed on through the generations in a lawful, controlled manner, without all the steps necessary in probate, without some of the problems in probate.
And without unintentionally causing harm to family members and friends.
Yeah, and so, I think as people are getting more sophisticated, and it's like you said, the gun laws are relatively new. When we talk about the history of law, it's only since the late 60s that really we've had the labor under a lot of these laws. And based on, the political tendencies, nothing's been added lately, but it might not be inconceivable that we're going to see more firearms restrictions coming down the pike.
Correct.
So I want to thank you for taking your time and coming on the show today. And if we need you, can we get you back?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And if you receive any questions and you want to forward them on to me, I'm happy to provide support to you.
I will, and Shane will also forward you the podcast information. We have this up at WHP580.com in the next hour or so, in case you want to listen back and see how poor my questions are and how good your answers are.
Okay.
All right, take care.
Have a nice afternoon.
You too. All right, Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. We had David M. Goldman, the gun trust lawyer, on. I hope you found him as beneficial as I did. I think what you should be thinking about is this estate planning in all aspects of your life, but here it's unique. What he's saying is guns are handled differently. They devolve differently, and the rules that surround them are different than what you're going to see with normal estate assets. Also, I think you should take the caution. Now, listen, if you're a gun shop owner out there and you're giving away these trusts, maybe what you should consider doing is partnering up with the guntrustlawyer.com or contacting them to learn a little bit more about how you should be doing it, a little bit more about the irrevocable trust aspect as well. So if you have a $10,000 gun collection and you want to pass it on to your kids, that irrevocable trust is going to be the way to do it. If you've ever wanted to own a silencer or semi-automatic or, fully automatic weapon, and you're capable of doing so, you may be able to own those class of weapons through a gun trust as well. So I think what we learned today was all very practical information, and it's stuff that I think we should all consider. So we'll bring them back down the road here when you all save up some questions for them. In the meantime, I want to remind you, if you want to find me or the lawyers in my firm, and we are taking new cases, you go to Rominger Law, ROMINGER law.com. We practice in all areas of law, and if we don't do it, we'll match you up with somebody who does. I'm meeting with people in my Lancaster office on Monday, for instance. I've been in Lancaster quite a bit recently. I'll be in the Carlisle office on Tuesday. We meet with people in Chambersburg, Harrisburg, York. So pretty much if you can hear this signal, we can help you. And, we've got Steve Snyder. He's doing a lot of municipal work. He's doing a lot of work with helping people with land use issues, trust, business, construction. We've got Vinny Manfredo doing a lot of criminal law, civil rights, personal injury lawsuits. We've got Lee Mandarino doing a lot of family law, a lot of personal injury. So we have all these lawyers available to you. And, of course, I am as well. And look forward to helping out if you can. So if you need to get hold of the office, it's RomingerLaw.com, or the phone number is 241-6070. That's 717-241-6070. Here comes my music. I'm not sure if I'll be live next week or not. I would love to be, but I may not be. Hard to say. But keep you posted on Facebook. And, of course, it's Carl with a K, Rominger. Just join me on Facebook. Feel free to friend me. Got some fun conversations going on there right now. Plus, I've got the website, The Gun Trust Lawyer, up. Make sure you visit theguntrustlawyer.com for me. Thanks.